Yo, what's good, Knicks Nation? Welcome back for another Game of the Week preview. We are previewing the New York Knicks facing. They'll be home against the Indiana Pacers. You can catch this game tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. And who better to preview this game with me? None other than Caitlin Cooper, basketball genius over here. She writes for Basketball. She wrote founder, CEO, whatever you want to call her. Great outlet right over there covering the Indiana Pacers. Just a great basketball mind in general. So make sure to lock in, tap in, share the links to this video. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't. Hit that thumbs up button for the gang. And yeah, this is going to be a good one, guys, because you know who returns. My guy, Obi Toppin. You already know what it is. But before all of that, Caitlin, how you doing? How you feeling today? What's going on?
I'm doing well. I hope that OG Anunoby is able to play because this feels like it's going to be the Raptors trade bowl game. Like which team likes their Raptors trade better?
Mm. Yeah, especially with the trade for Siakam, there's a good contingent of Knicks Nation that was hoping that Obi Toppin and not Bruce Brown was going out to Toronto, so that way we could have RJ, Quick, and Toppin all reunited to be the forefront of that. But a little difficult when you got Scotty Barnes over there, who you want to like center the entire deal, center the entire progress around.
For sure, yeah.
But Caitlin, give me some insight. Well, actually, let me ask you this: what are your thoughts about on the New York Knicks this season so far? Before I ask you about your Pacers.
The OG Anunoby trade was tremendous for them. I was very in favor of if the Pacers would have pulled the trigger for either of the Raptors wings, but just watching what they've done since that trade has happened, it just makes the roster make more sense. Skill
Mhm.
set wise, defensively, everybody just locks in and has a better place. The numbers, obviously, for that starting lineup are absolutely absurd right now on both ends of the court. A 15.8 net rating for that starting group. Their turnovers are up a little bit, but I think you kind of probably even take that to a degree because it feels like to my eye test in the game since that trade has happened that there's a little bit more movement in the offense, a little bit more passing than what you would have seen last year toward the end of the year. And that's not me trying to knock Jalen Brunson or Julius Randle. They're both very good isolation players, especially Jalen Brunson. But I feel like sometimes when you get into the playoffs, being able to also have that movement element is going to be something that adds a lot to the Knicks. And I just think that sometimes when I'm hearing some, I don't know where you guys stand on it, but when I'm hearing some of the stuff about like going after DeJounte Murray, I don't know that I would be in favor of that if I was a Knicks fan. I
Mm,
understand that they could use like another secondary creator, but I kind of like where this group is at right now, and I don't know if that's the star that I would necessarily be targeting to fit with this roster. So I think that they're exactly where you want them to be and have probably even exceeded expectations since the trade has happened.
for sure. I mean, early predictions we had like before the season even started. I saw this unit getting to. I projected like over expectations, right? Like, what is the
Mhm.
most like? I had the third seed for them right now, which they're currently at. Thanks to an not Indiana, thanks to a Philadelphia 76ers loss to the Golden State Warriors last night. Knicks are in sole possession of the third spot right now in the Eastern Conference. But to your point, what you said, it's been the OG Anunoby trade. I mean, you remove two guys who require a lot of touches in Emmanuel Quickly and RJ Barrett. You add in a guy who's able to cut off ball, knock down open threes, and honestly has been showing a little bit more of an offensive bag, especially in the mid range, just using his shoulder to create separation. It's been a revelation for this team because, as you pointed out, like guys like Brunson and Randall who are able to create for their own in isolation, their other attributes get to shine even more because defensively, OG takes away a lot of that pressure defensively. Hartenstein's been doing a great job defensively. I'm excited to see what this team looks like when they have Mitchell Robinson back. But everyone's just filling in their roles just very well, and so because of that, it's helped Brunson and Randall exceed, and this team just reach new heights. I mean, they went 14-2 throughout the month of January since the OG Anunoby trade, and it's just been great. So, from a Knicks standpoint, you're happy. Obviously, the injury to Randall is what's in the air right now, not knowing what is happening with his shoulder, when he'll be back, if he'll be the same player that will be aggressive because, he's a very physical player, especially this season. He's not relying on jump shots or of that nature like he was. A lot of tough mid range jumpers and even shooting a lot of threes, which he shouldn't have. Now he's getting downhill. And with that, you wonder, will he mentally be prepared for that to take that type of responsibility again, just being that bulldozer and getting through the lane. And we'll see what happens when he gets back. Obviously, OG has the elbow inflammation, expecting him to be back at some point. Hopefully, he's back for the game tomorrow so that way we can see Siakam and OG face up, both playing power forward because, if he's back, it's going to be him playing the four because of his defensive versatility. So hopefully that's back. He's back then. And then Mitch at some point, we'll find out more. 8 to 10 weeks, which starts now. He's supposed to be reevaluated. So we'll see what happens with Mitchell Robinson. But moving from the Knicks, give me some insight about your Indiana Pacers and what you like from them so far this season.
Yeah, so last night Tyrese finally comes back from the hamstring injury. He's only played in 10 of the last 11 games and he was on a minutes restriction. If anybody watched that game, Boston's been very effective defending him in the last 2 games that he's been available at, in part for 2 reasons, because they're very aggressive from the tip of games. A lot of times most teams will wait until like the fourth quarter to really start hunting him. Boston will do that very early into the game because they know that that could potentially wear and drain on him offensively as well. And then they do a lot where they will be weaking him. So they're forcing him left out of middle pick and rolls. And because he is so floater dependent, that can kind of limit him to a degree. So last night, the Pacers kind of tried to counter that and send a lot of the screens for him to actually just purposely attack to his left so he can still have access to the pick. So if you look at the numbers, they were sending him left way more, the Pacers deliberately, than they normally are. So I don't think he was at completely 100% yet either. So I'm interested to see where this matchup goes because, like you said, with OG Anunoby in the mix, like last year for the Raptors, typically OG would not guard Tyrese Haliburton. He would guard Buddy because Fred VanVleet was in the mix, and for reasons you would want to keep Fred at the point of attack, not necessarily because he was super sticky, but just for size advantage reasons. That's how those matchups typically struck out. And the one game that the Pacers played against the Raptors this year, it was OG, and he had some moments that were really strong against Tyrese in the fourth quarter of that game. But I kind of wanted to figure out and see like, well, would OG guard Pascal Siakam at the 4 and guard his own teammate, or would they put him at the point of attack? Because I did see in the game when the Knicks kind of just blew out Denver the other night that they did have OG guarding Jamal Murray with who was it? Who would have been defending Michael Porter Jr.? Dante DiVincenzo or Josh Hart? One of the two. But
Yeah, it was
anyways,
one of
they
those two. Those
one
two
of the two.
guys.
They had OG at the point of attack. So that's just the versatility that he gives you, that you can really move him around, and that'll be different than what the Pacers would have seen. Because like I tried to rewatch this game in preparation to talk to you, and I was rewatching the first half. I'm like, this is so pointless because the Knicks didn't have quickly. They didn't have RJ Barrett obviously because the trade had just happened. They didn't have OG Anunoby. I'm like, the defense is just not going to be the same caliber as what the Pacers are going to see on Thursday. So it wasn't particularly meaningful. Other than, Dante DiVincenzo did have his career high in that game, 38 points with Tyrese guarding him. So we'll see.
Hey, and Dante just went off last night. He had another 30 plus point outing. So, he's been great stepping up, needing some offense next to Jalen Brunson while Randall's been out. But, if OG's back, I would probably expect him to be guarding Pascal because you got to think Hartenstein's going to be guarding Turner. I don't think there's anybody. I mean, maybe you want to go with Josh Hart because he's starting right now since because Randall would be out. It to me because Precious right now is filling in at the 4 spot since we don't have
Right.
OG. So I would expect OG to go and defend Siakam. I would expect Randall if Randall was healthy, and then you could do that OG on
Right.
Halliburton. But I think you're going to go in a different direction. Maybe it's probably Josh Hart that's going to guard Tyrese since he's out there. I don't think it would be Dante. I think you leave Dante on somebody else, and then you shift Jalen Brunson over so that you don't have to worry about a
Yeah.
liability defensively. But it'll be
Yeah,
interesting.
they put Brunson on Aaron Nesmith in the prior game, and DiVincenzo was trying to track Tyrese, but that's because Josh Hart was coming off the bench at the time. So we shall see.
Yeah.
Tyrese did have his 2020 game, so
Oh my god, that game said like honestly, it was just like it meant nothing. And I'm sure like the day that the trade happened for Siakam, I don't know if you guys played that day, but it's like, I don't have to make out of this yet until the deal is done. But with the Siakam trade, since we're talking about Pascal, like what has been the revelation for the Pacers right now? Is like, have you seen better defense? Because that's been a bigger issue for this team. They've been having a historic offensive season so far, led by Tyrese Halliburton. Like, has Siakam really helped change that?
yeah, I mean, the defense has moved up modestly. I didn't check the numbers after last night's game, but I think that they were at 20th or around 19th since the trade has happened. And obviously, there's been a lot of people in and out of the lineup and adjustments made there. And I think the Pacers are still trying to figure out how they want to use him. He's a definite upgrade over what the other options were, but like last night, they had him defending Jaylen Brown and had Aaron Nesmith on Jason Tatum in the first half. And I think that that's probably something that I would have flip flopped because Jaylen Brown is obviously a little bit smaller. He doesn't control. Um, as much with his upper body as Jason Tatum does, but he's more agile. And that's kind of like if you want Aaron guarding somebody, Aaron Nesmith, somebody who's really like He's going to be pressing up on people, try to be an irritant, whereas Pascal Siakam is more somebody who's going to contain. So it was similar in the Phoenix matchup where they tried to experiment and see if they could put Pascal on Devin Booker in the first game of those two. And then by halftime, they're like, let's not overthink this one. Let's go ahead and put Siakam on Durant. And even in that one, they had Siakam at the 5, and he was doing a lot with really quick rotations. So I think by comparison to what Pascal's defense looked like just before the trade with Toronto to what it's been with the Pacers, it's definitely been a leg up from there, similar to what you would have seen with OG. Like OG was not defending at his level for the Raptors, and then suddenly he comes over to the Knicks, and it's like, oh, he's completely putting the clamps on Anthony Edwards. Like that's what these guys are capable of doing. So I think that there has been some modest improvement, but I think overall, like the Pacers do still have it's possible to hunt Buddy Hield. It's possible to hunt Tyrese Halliburton. And that's kind of what they're going to have to work around and keep finding solutions for is how do we protect these mismatches and what are we going to do like in a playoff scenario if that's what opposing teams are doing.
Do you think you still have enough defense? Because like with Siakam, Turner, and Naismith, or is that like a good defensive beginning to what the Pacers need? Or do you still think that there's more because of like Hield's inability to be a good defender?
Yeah, I mean, Buddy by comparison to himself has been overall better. But like in the first matchup against the Suns last week, like the last 4 possessions was Phoenix hunting him. And then you have to make a choice because like I think that they probably could have gone switch to blitz or been doing a little bit more pre-switching to keep him out of those. And in the second game, that's what they did. Devin Booker had 62 points, and by they ended up having to blitz and get the ball out of his hands in isolations, and same with Kevin Durant. And then they ended up winning that game because the defense was a lot stouter in the fourth quarter by comparison to what it was on the prior matchup on that Sunday. So I think it's just stuff like that. Like there's going to be the opportunity to be putting either one of them into the action, and it's just you have to pick your poison, right? Like that's tougher to do against Boston last night when you're targeting Tyrese because of what their 3-point shooting is. So I think like one little thing, like just putting my hat on if I was doing something is the Pacers do not play zone. So they've only played
Mm.
7 zone possessions this season, and that in the past, like they've played zone under Rick Carlisle. They did it the last 2 seasons, but they really tried to kind of simplify their overall defensive package this year. But I think that that's something that they could look at in spots just to, even if it's just putting Tyrese in the back corner, kind of like what the Miami Heat have done with Duncan Robinson in the past, to just show a different look and protect him from being put directly in the action all the time. So the Knicks probably won't be seeing any zone tomorrow, but maybe somewhere down the road they will.
Salute to Knicks Nation. Thank you all for tuning in for another Game of the Week preview. With me today is none other than Caitlin Cooper. She is the founder, writer, creator for Basketball She Wrote. Make sure to go follow her and check all of her work out. She covers the Indiana Pacers. Make sure to support our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Use that promo code KFTV to get up to a $100 match. Caitlin, you brought up Rick Carlisle and the adjustments defensively. You're talking about defensive adjustments for this team, and what is the big adjustment for him this season? Because he's leading a historic offense right now. I mean, between him and Halliburton, like this offense is just it's on another level that the league hasn't seen before.
Yeah, I mean, I think like to fully understand how much Rick Carlisle's adapted, I think you have to look at what was going on immediately after the trade for Tyrese occurred. So it was very evident in the first 4 games that Tyrese played that he wanted to play quick off of makes as well as misses. So like he'll already be clapping for inbound passes and wanting to turn the ball the other way. And the Pacers for those games played at a much quicker tempo. And I was like, maybe something's going to change here because like the prior 6 teams that Rick had coached in Dallas with Luka, those were like bottom 5, bottom 10 in transition frequency. And then as the season went on, the Pacers fell back down in that regard. And there was kind of a push and pull like, would they fully invest themselves into that identity and playing like that, or would it be more play calling? And Rick completely leaned into what Tyrese's identity is. He's coaching this team to the strengths of their best player. And I think that it is a load for opposing teams to play, particularly during the regular season. If you're on the second night of a back to back, that's going to be rough for you. Like it was very feather in the cap, tip the hat to what the Celtics did last night because they were doing some full court pressure and applying that further on the second night of a back to back. And that's very hard to do because, like, and Pascal's even talked about this, like in Toronto, they were #1 in the league in transition frequency, but they were running mainly off of stops and off of turnovers, rebounds. The Pacers do it all the time. Like they are second in time to shoot off of made shots behind, I think, only Oklahoma City. So very tough to play. They also play very quick in the half court. There's a lot of random offense. I've talked about it in the past, but like they're #1 in non-contact screens. So like how much like guarding slips and guarding running slips is very hard, and they use a lot of different screeners as well. So there's just a lot of confusion when you play the Indiana Pacers and you're having to make very quick decisions. So I think that that all speaks to what Rick has done in the Tyrese era.
Now just figure out that defense and that team will really be quick. And what do you like? So do you want to see Carlisle play more zone with this team, or would that not even work because of like Heald and Halliburton at the top of it?
I think like I mean I would probably try to play Tyrese backline. I'd like to see them try to input that before the playoffs because I do just think it's a good thing to have in your back pocket just to change the complexion of a game. Like you don't even need to do it for that many possessions. And because it like I said, it just prevents teams from being able to just screen Tyrese up into the action and look at it. And like they did it. They did it the last 2 seasons. They even had a wrinkle where they would go mid possession man two zone where like on a high post touch they would go and match up on those. They just weren't very good at it overall. And like I said, I think that the emphasis from the coaching staff was really try to simplify things this year and put an emphasis on defending individual matchups. That's why when you look at their defense, they're very quote unquote good at limiting 3 point attempts, but they give up a lot of points in the paint because they're trying to, coax guys to be, really defending, guard your yard, guard what you're doing, do pick and rolls 2 versus 2. They stay home on the 3 point line as much as possible. Kind of the, it goes back to you got to take away something. You got to be willing to live with something. And the Pacers have decided that they're going to take away threes. There has been some adaptation to that throughout the season where they've been more willing to show help in certain games where like you can see them play against the Bucks and they're sending three bodies at Giannis where earlier in the season they wouldn't have been doing that. So I think that they do continue to tinker with it. And I think that another benefit that you have is because Siakam is very used to playing a lot of different types of zone and all the time that he played under Nick Nurse. So I think that that's something that you could use with him as well.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what I feel like with Siakam now on that team. Like, I think Carl should be a little more like open to experimentation because Siakam is that versatile defender that you could throw, not necessarily like OG level, but he's still versatile enough where he could help you just guard on the perimeter, guard in the paint. Like, that's been like the biggest issue with the Pacers, like from when I tap in, and it's just I know you try to say you got to live with something. It's just interesting because when I look at this defense, you guys allow like a lot of points in the paint, and it's like for a team like the Knicks who are coming through, like that's where they like to live. Even though it's not been as great as it has been in years past, since the OG trade, that's what they like to do, especially with Brunson. If Randall were there, get downhill. But I don't know. I guess it's just the opposite philosophy when I see teams just lighting up the Knicks from three, and I'm like, oh, maybe you want to protect protect the perimeter, Tibbs, and then it's you gotta choose what pick your poison as you said. But moving along for the Pacers this season, they did win the in-season tournament. I want to know what your thoughts about that were.
Yeah, I mean the Lakers game was illuminating, and I think it was a good experience for the Pacers to get there because it gave them a brighter spotlight. It gave Tyrese a brighter spotlight, and surely, like I'm sure there was players around the league being like, "Hey, that looks like a fun play style. That looks like somebody that I would like to play with." Maybe that was, a part of motivation that maybe Pascal was seeing some of that. Maybe that gave the Pacers some confidence that they'd be able to retain him if they took a risk and made a trade for him. But in addition to that, I thought it was a good measuring stick because in that game, the Lakers did a lot of blitzing against Tyrese, bringing Anthony Davis up to the pick. Like, not every team's going to be able to do that because not every team has the personnel to be good at blitzing, but the Lakers did because they have a lot of length. And that forced the Pacers to have to, make some adjustments not only in that game, but also moving after that when they went through a little bit of a losing streak. After that was over with a little bit of hangover with what their travel was and adapting to teams trapping and blitzing him more. And then also like what you just pointed out, like they gave up over 80 points in the paint in that game while the Lakers went 2 of 13 from three. Like that type of defensive approach isn't one size fits all, right? I think in that type of a matchup, you'd be a lot more willing to live with the Lakers shooting threes than giving up 80 points in the paint, especially when you're seeing like Obi picking LeBron up near the logo and everybody's staying anchored to the corners, especially like, Miles Turner staying anchored to Anthony Davis, potentially coming off a pin down when Anthony Davis, I think over the last 2 years has made like 9 corner threes total. So it's those types of things where I think that that led to maybe some reevaluation on some of what they were doing, and then just Tyrese learning and navigating some of that a little bit more too about like, is this a hard trap? Is it a quick show? How long is the person going to stay? Can I maybe hold my dribble and then turn and get around the edge of that defense? Do I need to pass out over the top of it? And then also just like I said, like not every team's going to have that much size to be coming up and impacting those types of passes. So I thought it was overall it was a good thing because it helped the Pacers know exactly where they were at and where some of their holes were that they needed to address.
Yeah, and then you see from that they go get Pascal Siakam to address one of the issues. But now, like as you start, you continue to see, like you said, like the defense has taken it up it's taken a slight tick up with Pascal there. Do you see the Pacers now making any other adjustments? I mean, from that game, it's not just that you need someone like Siakam. Obviously, you guys were trying to get OG Anunoby as well. You're trying to do a 2-for-1 in one deal with the Raptors. Do you see the Pacers making another move this season? Is it just rock with what we got and we go attack in the offseason? What do you think with the deadline on the way?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's possible that maybe Buddy still ends up being on the move just because I know that at the beginning of the season they were pretty far apart in extension talks. I'm fairly pro Buddy in the sense that he's the best movement shooter that Pascal Siakam's ever played with. His gravity is still immense, even though he hasn't shot the ball as well. I do think by comparison to himself, like I said before, defensively, he's been a little bit better, though I don't think that you would, you're not going to say that Buddy's a lockdown defender by any means,
By
but
any
I do,
stretch.
I do think that there's something to be said for the fact that he might be more valuable to the Pacers than he is to other teams, and that maybe I think that he still really likes playing with Tyrese, likes playing in Rick Carlisle's system, and there is a chance that you could be like, hey, we'd like to have him for this stretch run of the season, and then he could test free agency. And if he doesn't get the types of offers that he's hoping or expecting for, where it's a potential where they could still re-sign him. I don't know that. That's not me coming from an informed standpoint of what the offers will be for him this summer, but the chemistry between he and Tyrese is really good, and he's the only person on the team, minus now Pascal Siakam, who has a lot of inverse gravity, and that you'll see has been drawing quite a few double teams, especially if he gets mismatches in the post or if he goes into a bully drive, where you can send Buddy Hield to Tyrese Halliburton. And if Giannis is guarding Buddy Hield and are guarding Tyrese and Buddy goes to set that ghost screen, that Giannis will go with Buddy and Giannis will continue to stick with Buddy on the 3-point line. There's nobody else on the team that you're going to be able to do something like that with, where the defender will be willing to leave Tyrese. So I think that there's value in keeping him around, but again, that's not me coming from a front office knowledge perspective of like, hey, has this guy told us that he's definitively not going to re-sign here? And what are the offers? Is there a potential that we could get better by moving him? But that's kind of the one guy that I would probably still keep an eye on that could potentially be on the move.
Death, taxes, Buddy Hield being on the trading block. That's all I can count on by the NBA trade deadline. And look, it seems like the Pacers are bought in on this guy. You guys got the alternative jerseys that are the flag colors from the Bahamas. So it seems like they're all for Buddy Hield sticking around.
Yeah,
But no, go
no, go
ahead.
ahead. Go ahead. No, I was just gonna say, like, yeah, I think that there was some stuff at the start of the season where people were kind of, I think, misinterpreting some of that reporting as Buddy having asked for a trade. I don't think that Buddy ever asked for a trade. I think that both sides, I think that the Pacers value Buddy, and I think that Buddy values being there. Just how much does each side value each other in terms of extra dollars and cents? I think there was a divide there.
Look, I think for the shooter that Buddy Hield is, it makes sense to have him on because he's part of the reason why this offense is moving the way that it is, right? I mean, he's one of the most lethal 3-point shooters out there. The only issue is that you lose something defensively, and that's where could they be looking at somebody like Nebhard to replace him at some point? Because he was part of that core where it seems like you have him, Matherin, Halliburton, like that seems like the core that you were going to build around, and now it just seems like it's constantly shape shifting as the years move on.
Yeah, the two spot's the one to keep an eye on, right? And that's the one that's still going to matter towards the back end of this season. Because I felt like, before Tyrese had established himself as an potential MVP candidate and the Pacers had the greatest offense of all time, this season for me was going to be about definitively knowing at the end of the year, like, are Matherin and or Nembhard critical pieces of this core, and which one of them pairs better with Tyrese, or maybe both of them do. And I still don't feel like I fully have enough data points on that to know. I
Mm.
think for the rest of this season that it makes a lot of sense for Matherin to come off the bench, simply because now you do have Pascal Siakam, you have another person in the starting lineup who can get their own shot and can create and make passes for other people. But I think that Matherin pairs really well with TJ McConnell, because it unlocks him as a cutter. TJ looks for him filling lanes in transition, and also you can run like some little horns get stuff that melds really well between the two of them. But Matherin is a player who's mostly better playing out of sets, and it's easier to do that with the bench group than it is to do that with the starters. So I think that the two of them give a nice punch. I don't know if they'll be available to play against the Knicks, but I do think that they missed some of that zip last night against the Celtics in terms of what they give you. Then as far as Buddy and Andrew gives you another really stout defender. For most of the season, I haven't looked this week to look at what the cleaning the glass number is, but by the numbers, he's been the most impactful defender on the roster. He's pretty sticky at the point of attack, and he also has really good off ball instinct. So that's always helpful to put next to Tyrese when you can have Andrew, just like in the prior game, Andrew defended Jalen Brunson. Tomorrow night, that's probably going to have to be Aaron Nesmith, because I don't think you want Tyrese or Buddy trying to contain Jalen Brunson in isolation. So that's what you get there. And then with Buddy, you get his 3-point percentage is down this year, but you get the gravity, you get the shooting, you get the savvy off ball movement, just like, something that they did last night. Something that Pascal gives them that they haven't had in the past is if you cross match a 5 onto the 4, Pascal's really good at keeping a live dribble and being able to navigate that, even if he sees some help with a big sagging off. So the Celtics moved to putting Porzingis onto Pascal Siakam, so they used Buddy as a stack screener, and then instead of actually setting the stack screen, they just pulled Buddy out from the roll and had him set a touch screen for Pascal in the corner to be able to attack Porzingis into that space. So that's another dynamic that you get with Buddy playing with the starters. So I expect that might continue to change as the season goes on. Last night the roster was healthy and they still started Buddy at the 2 with Andrew coming in at the backup 1, but that might depend on matchups and what they like. We'll see what they do against the Knicks tomorrow.
Salute to Knicks Nation. Thank you all for tuning in for another Game of the Week preview. With me on the other side is none other than Caitlin Cooper. You can go find her over at Basketball She Wrote, founder of that awesome outlet covered the Indiana Pacers. Make sure to support our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Use that promo code KFTV to get up to a $100 match. And hey, shout out to all the franchise channel members in here. I see Brian Orante in here. I see JJ in here. TM is in here. Our King Mod. Shout out to Mike Rambo. Shout out to Lauren Smith. Shout out to Jamaica Queens. Shout out to all you guys for tuning in right now. Muhammad Mustafa, shout out to you. Thank you all for tuning in for Game of the Week preview. All right, Caitlin, let's get into this matchup. Let's get into the numbers. Let's get into some stuff to break this game down. Talked about Indiana Pacers, prolific offense. Every single category you look at, points off of turnovers, second chance points, fast break points, points in the paint. They're up there. They're up there in what they can do. Defensively is where I'm looking for the Knicks to make their impact. And we already talked about points in the paint. They're dead last. That's one area that I'm looking for the Knicks to take advantage of. And second chance opportunity. So that's getting a rebound, put it back up there. Obviously, Randall was one of our top guys, but we still been doing a good job, especially with Josh Hart out there, who plays bigger than a guard. All right. It's funny that everyone's like, oh, if Randall were to go down or anybody's missing time, you're playing power forward, buddy. And he tweeted out like, no, I'm a guard, not a forward. And it's like, ha, that's what you think. That is what you think. So I'm looking for the Knicks to really make an impact on that side of the ball. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be curious to see how the matchups work out there. I mean, I think the Brunson one's tricky. That's probably going to have to be Aaron Nesmith. And then Aaron, like, he got moved on to Jamal Murray after halftime against Denver. He's been doing a little bit more at the point of attack, and you can extend the pressure with him. He's an important piece offensively as well. Like, he matters in terms of being able to knock down shots. He's doing more off the dribble and being able to make some interior passes off of drives. But I would expect that Aaron's going to have to go on Brunson, and then Siakam is probably going to have to go on OG if OG's playing. Tyrese Tyrese was the person guarding Dante in the prior matchup, so maybe they put Tyrese on Josh Hart, maybe they try Buddy on Dante. That's a potential one. And then Turner on Isaiah Hartenstein. Something with iHeart, like being able to run some of the stuff out of the elbows, I think could be really effective for the Knicks because the Pacers, like in games where, like last night, the Celtics will go to the action a lot where they'll put Porzingis at the elbow and then just run little split action that targets Tyrese and those off-ball screening actions for whatever reason. The Pacers have not been able to guard that very well. Like they don't want to negotiate the switch or somebody can get loose off the cut. I know the Knicks like to do some of that with Isaiah Hartenstein, so I might even look to see if they would be willing to alternate the offense and initiate some stuff from there, especially since Randall's not going to be available. Like you're going to be taking and redistributing those touches somewhere. So just getting a little bit of movement there, I think probably would be effective against what the Pacers do defensively as well.
To be honest with you, that is something with this trade and with Mitch going down has really opened up the Knicks offense. It's not only has Brunson like not I hate using the word improved as a passer because he was a good passer. It's just
Right.
the other half of getting the assist is the guy's got to knock it down. And when you have somebody like OG who can knock down the three who's wide open, or Dante, where you just get out to Randall now that there's so much more space, you get a better percentage chance of just getting that assist now. But the other key thing is what you actually meant to mention. Hartenstein has just been I like working high post with him, being in that starting unit. This is where you start looking at this offense and you're like, it's no shade against Mitchell Robinson, just a different player,
Mm-hmm.
legit, like elite offensive rebounder. elite when it comes to pick and roll coverage. Does those things very well, right? Defensively, he's our anchor, safety valve. But when you watch Hartenstein out there and you just see how he's able to create offense just from the high post, he's finding guys like OG, Brunson, or Dante cutting, even Josh Hart when he's out there, and sometimes even Randall. And you're like, wow, a big that can pass, just like Joakim Noah when Tibbs had him out on the Bulls. And it's like when you get somebody like that who just understands the dynamics of passing and looking for guys who are cutting and having willing cutters, it opens up the game immensely for this Knicks team. And that's just been the biggest revelation. So I would say expect some of that, especially Hartenstein coming back off of an Achilles injury and just, they're managing his minutes. But with him being back, that part of the game has just opened up for the Knicks. And that's why they've been flying. That's why the offense has just ticked up even to another level, because you just have legit cutters now, which I've been asking for years for this team. It's like, can someone move off ball? Can someone move off ball? And it felt like that's only with the second unit, but now we're getting that in the starters. So that's been quite a revelation.
Yeah, and that's probably why too, like what I said off the top, that you're probably willing to accept that the Knicks are turning the ball over a little bit more. Because like last year, I'm guessing that part of the reason why they didn't turn the ball over very much is like they're winning the possession war in terms of, they didn't turn the ball over a lot and they're getting a ton of offensive rebounds, but because you're running more isolations, you're not going to turn it over as much because the ball is sticking in the hands of Brunson and Randall for reasons that I understand. But now that you're kind of also implementing the movement element, when you're passing the ball, there's more chance to turn the ball over.
Yep.
Like I know that this doesn't completely apply to the Pacers because the Pacers play at a very fast pace and Tyrese moves the ball a lot and they don't have a lot of turnovers, but that is an abnormality. Like that's not something that typically applies to a lot of teams. But I think sometimes you're willing to take some of those turnovers and maybe give it up some of those possessions because you are getting the long-term benefits that I think will pay off for the Knicks in the playoffs by adding and having other modes of offense in addition to and around what Brunson already does. So yeah, I would be looking at that too, and two because like if the Pacers aren't able to contain Brunson very well tomorrow, which they did an okay job in the prior game with Nemhard as his primary matchup. Of course, that game, like we said, wasn't super informative, but they at times you'll see them go to like three-quarter court trapping against a guy like Trae Young or do some more of that. And because of what you said, like I trust Isaiah Hartenstein to make passes out of that and be a release valve a lot more than I would Mitchell Robinson, even though Robinson obviously gives you a different dynamic and has other skill sets that he brings to the table.
For sure, for sure, for sure. You mentioned all the other matchups. I guess the only tweak I'll make is that if OG doesn't play tomorrow, you get Precious Achua out there.
Mm-hmm.
Knicks fans' favorite right now because he's been balling, he's been hooping out, and I got to give him credit because I was out I was clowning him because there was some decision making, especially during the Memphis
Right.
Grizzlies game. I don't know if you caught that one where he just dives for the loose ball, grabs it, and then starts to throw it over his head, trying to lead somebody. And I'm like, this is not an and one mixtape. It goes back to being a turnover again. I'm like, please stop. But he's been hooping. He's been defending really well, getting your blocks, getting easy buckets. Really has improved. It seems like Tibbs has really unlocked him, and now he's playing at another level right now. But if Precious were to be the starter instead of OG, how would that change the way the Pacers guard?
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll still probably be Siakam, but the one thing like defensively with Achua in the games like that I watched even when he was still with the Raptors is that he's pretty switchable and he's not bad defending in isolation. So if the Knicks get into a place where like Siakam is the screener for Tyrese, I think that they'd probably feel pretty comfortable with Achua switching out to that and being able to do something against Tyrese in isolation, maybe. Obviously that would be an option too with OG Anunoby, so you're not really losing anything there, but like still having that element of switchability for the Knicks roster. And then like you said, like Achua can be pretty polarizing in terms of what some of his decision making can be, but also he can be eye popping with what he can do athletically. Like this guy is the type of person who can catch the ball on the post and face up and use a stutter rip and get to the rim. Like sometimes he just really surprises you with what he'll whip out of nowhere. So I'm usually in favor of the Precious Achua experience as somebody watching the team from afar because you never completely know what's going to happen. I don't know that I want to watch him a lot on the team that I'm covering, but when I watch him play for other teams, I usually have an enjoyable experience.
Yeah. Let's just say that we have a Discord. There's a KFTV Discord. Apparently, I am wanted in the Discord for talking poorly about Precious earlier in the trade after the trade occurred. But for looking at how the Knicks are going to guard, I don't see. I think on Halliburton, I think it would be. I think you're gonna get Josh Hart on Halliburton. I think you're gonna get uh Brunson on Buddy Hield just to stay on the perimeter. or and then for Aaron Naismith, I think you might get, or maybe get Dante on Hield. You might get Dante on Hield, and you might
You'll get
put,
Dante on Hield.
yeah,
I
I think,
would bet
yeah,
that the Knicks will put Brunson on Aaron.
yeah, just because I don't think I want Brunson to be running around with Hield now that I think about it. Then yeah, put Brunson on Aaron because he's not really involved in the offense as much. If it's Precious or OG, they're guarding Siakam, and then the center matchup, we already know what it is. That's how I look at it as. But out of all those, okay, even though they're probably not going to be defending each other, this is my key matchup of the game. It's Jalen Brunson versus Tyrese Halliburton. You have
Mm-hmm.
Tyrese Halliburton, who's just, look, I'm no Wally Zerbiak. He's no fake all-star. This kid's a legit all-star. There's reasons why he should be mentioned in the MVP consideration when he was healthy. And just for what he's done for this team, just he's the engine. He does everything for them, getting everybody set up. Like Halliburton has certainly been on one and has shown so with how the Indiana Pacers have been playing this season. And then you got Jalen Brunson, who also deserves to be in the MVP talks just for what he's done with the New York Knicks and elevated their game of play. And he's just been on another level too, especially shooting the three ball this year. He's shooting it so well. These guys, they're not going to be defending each other. These guys were teammates on Team USA, but I expect both of them to ball out tomorrow, especially with the Knicks being injured. I think it's going to be a little bit more like the defense has been solid, but to keep up with the Pacers, we're going to see some heavy offense. Is going to be led by Tyrese Halliburton and Jalen Brunson. What do you think about that matchup?
Yeah, I mean, going back to the Team USA thing, I know that like that started to become like a weird rivalry talking point about who should have been the starter. And I remember I was very much in favor of Tyrese continuing to come off the bench because I thought that their greatest strength was going to be their depth and that the unit that was coming off the bench really fit the way that Tyrese plays and his ability
I
to hit
agree.
moving targets. But I also was like always very keyed in on the minutes that they played together because that was going to give Tyrese an opportunity, and something that he has parlayed into the regular season is that when they were out there together, it was more likely that Jalen Brunson was going to have the ball in his hands and that Tyrese was going to play off ball. And I felt like watching that, like if Tyrese could learn how to become a better role player, he could be an even more dynamic star. And I think that that's really shown up because there are games where teams will face guard him, they'll pressure him, and he'll have to start possessions away from the ball, or he'll have to be the stack screener and leak out and then catch it in spot up situations, or move into passing windows away from the ball in order to free himself. And I've seen him make strides at this season, and I think that some of that carries over from the fact that he was playing minutes with Jalen Brunson on Team USA. But like, yeah, I really enjoy both of them because stylistically they are so different in the way that they
So
approach
different.
and the
They're
way that
so
they
different.
approach and find their advantages on the offensive end of the floor. And like in the last game, I actually wrote an article because Tyrese had turned it over against one of the Knicks traps. They were playing Isaiah Hartenstein fairly high in the pick and roll against Tyrese, and he turned the ball over. And I think Dante DiVincenzo got leaked out and got a layup out of it. And Jalen Brunson didn't run back because it was an easy breakaway, fast break opportunity for Dante. And because he didn't run back, Tyrese knew, hey, Brunson's down here on the court with me. The Pacers are going to run like an off-ball screening action where they run somebody into a handoff into a ball screen, and Tyrese switched sides of the floor and was like, no, you're going to run that with me now because Brunson's down here and he's going to be guarding me and he's not going to be able to stick with me through these screens. And like that's the type of stuff that Tyrese does. Like I know sometimes people talk about the Pacers being an assist factory and will kind of delegitimize how many assists he gets, and like assists aren't a measure of playmaking anyways. Like I mean Tyrese even said that in that game. Like the Pacers made 23 threes. When you're making shots, you're going to get assists. That doesn't completely reflect what advantages he's creating because no number will reflect the types of stuff that he thinks and sees in advance and is able to move teammates around. I've seen him direct possessions where he doesn't even touch the ball and he should quote unquote get an assist because he thought through, here's where the advantages are going to be for my other teammates, even if I don't have the ball in my hands. So he's a very cerebral player. I really enjoy watching him for that aspect of it, in addition to just the flow that he's able to inject into an offense, which is completely different than watching Jalen Brunson really tunnel his way into spots and be so pristine with his footwork and be able to get wherever he wants to go, in addition to what he's added with his pull-up shooting since he's come to the Knicks. So tremendous. I really enjoy all of the games between the Pacers and the Knicks, and in addition to the person that we haven't even talked about yet, Obi Toppin, who both teams have in
Oh
common
my
as
goodness
well.
gracious. I was trying to bury the lead a little bit because I know I saw some people in the chat wondering when we were going to talk about Obi Toppin, but gotta give the guys their shine. All right, we're talking about two legit players. I mean, the last thing before I asked you about Obi Toppin, because the thing about Halliburton is like I don't even know like the last traditional point guard that, and I'm not saying like there's no like point guard is like so has evolved from
Right.
what it was, right? The guy that brings up the ball, organizes the offense is still like not saying that Brunson doesn't do that, but the level that what Halliburton does like the assist factor, like I like Jason Kidd, Chris Paul, those are the guards I think of who are like in that mindset, traditional point guards, and that's where I give like Halburn. And I never was like, I guess you were talking about for Team USA, right? For who should start, him or Brunson. I didn't even think about him. I was like, Halburn deserves to start. I thought Brunson deserved to start too. And I'm looking at the Dame selection. I'm like, Brunson's been better than Dame like this season. Like if we're keeping a buck, like every time we
How did
even
that? I don't understand how that happened. Like, how did Knicks fans not vote for Jalen Brunson?
no. Knicks fans voted for Jalen Brunson. The thing is that we also need the casual fan who doesn't tune in every single day to vote. And I went on a whole spiel, and it's true.
I
Like, look,
was very
when you listen,
confused by that.
like when I watch, First Take, I'm not going to go into the whole thing. When I watch First Take or any of these things, like they're always talking about like Halliburton, MVP type caliber. You go on these platforms praising the living daylights out of Halliburton, and rightfully so. When it comes to the Knicks, it's always like, oh well, Brunson's this, but is he a 1A? Is he this? The Knicks, it's like every time you talk down and you like most people are tuning into those shows. I'm
That's
like,
true.
every time you do that, like if someone's not watching all 82 games like what we're doing, you're not going to realize what these players can do. So for that, I blame those people for really like minimizing the impact that he's had on this game because Dame has just been around for a longer, more established. He's got the followers. You got to help. You got to help these players. You got
Can
to
I say
campaign for them.
something briefly about that too? Just like the
Sure.
talking points around Brunson that like I don't really understand why the conversation is like not to just pick it out, but like talking about him being a smaller guard and you can't win in that sense, then why don't you talk like and I just feel like talk about what ways to build around the star that already plays in New York then and how to balance out the roster. Like
This is what I'm saying.
I don't
Like
really understand those talking points all the time. And I feel that way about like I would feel the same way about the Pacers. Like, yeah, we can talk about Tyrese's defense. Well, then talk Tyrese is the franchise star in Indiana. He's completely reestablished what this team is. Talk about how to build the roster around him to mitigate those things. Like there's no denying what Jalen Brunson did in the playoffs last year and how
and that
important he is to the Knicks. So
you're preaching to the choir, Kalen. You're preaching to the choir. But I got to ask you now about Obi Toppin. Has Obi Toppin improved? We had the debates as Knicks Nation last year for the years that he was here. It was always like everyone thought it was like, oh well, maybe there is a faction of the fan base that believes Obi was better than Randall. But for me, it's always that we never maximized his time here because he could offer something different to relieve Randall of playing so many minutes. I get what Tom Thibodeau is about, all that stuff. Never said Obi was better than Randall, but there felt like there were times where it's like even 10 minutes is too little. Could we give Randall a little bit more rest so that way he could be fresh for the playoffs? Is there a way that we can just rest Randall so he's not, in danger of getting injured? That's how I looked at it as. But has Obi improved while he's been out in Indiana?
yeah, I mean, I think there's a reason why he wasn't starting anymore. And I think that there also was a reason why you can't deny that it's somewhat of an indictment if you're watching the Pacers play the Milwaukee Bucks or the Washington Wizards and Buddy Hield is defending Giannis or Buddy Hield is defending Kyle Kuzma. That's an
Mhm.
indictment of Obi, and the numbers were what they were. Like, net rating and defensive rating are not an individual stat, but he was the only starter with a negative net rating. So they ended up moving him back to the bench. And there were questions, at least on my part, that I'm like, well, if he is coming off the bench, then he's not going to be playing as much with Tyrese. And obviously, Obi's been a tremendous play finisher this year. He's leading the league in 2 point percentage. He's been very effective off of cuts. And I kind of wondered, like, would he be as visible if he was playing off the bench because he wasn't when they made the initial change to put Jalen Smith into the starting lineup before they traded for Pascal Siakam. And now here in this little bit while Tyrese has been out, he's had some really tremendous performances. Like he made the putback dunk against the Suns that was
Mhm.
effectively the game winner. He had several possessions in that matchup against Phoenix. I mean, there was a massive emphasis on part of the Pacers coaching staff to be getting the Pacers to attack the rim against what Phoenix's defense is. So Obi had 5 shots, I believe, off of 2 or more dribbles in that game. I think he had 6 against the game prior against Phoenix. So I think like from a ball handling standpoint, that's not something that you probably would have seen a lot with the Knicks, and you weren't seeing a lot with the Pacers up until here recently, where you're seeing him do a little bit more off the dribble. And then like I think maybe I underrated a little bit how good he is at moving the ball. He makes very quick decisions. Like he is somebody that you can set a screen and he's going to find the next advantage as like a little bit of a connector, or he can, take and drive from the corners and make the pass to the opposite 45. I think that's been pretty decent. And then also just his shooting. Obviously, he's shooting the heck out of the 3-point ball this year. I didn't expect him to shoot the ball this well. And there's been strides made with that where sometimes you'll even see like he's very angular, so it can be hard for him to stop on a dime. Like when you're watching somebody like Buddy who can just stay completely unbalanced in transition. Obi's actually taken and made some transition threes and then also like shown that he can backpedal into the corner and make a three off of movement or lift up from the corners a little bit and make some off of movement in addition to just hitting standstill spot up shots. So I do think he's improved and he's shown that he can be a pretty decent six man for the Pacers even when Tyrese hasn't been available. Now last night a lot of his minutes were matched back to Tyrese's again. I think that Tyrese makes whoever he plays with typically better, especially as a play finisher. But I do think that Obi's gotten better, but I also think there's a reason why the Pacers traded for Pascal Siakam. Like I
Oh,
don't think Obi's a starting four, but I think he's been very useful for them as a role player and will probably continue to be for the rest of this season.
there you go. And there we have it. We know he's going to be back in Madison Square Garden, so he's probably get some Obi chance, maybe, maybe.
Oh, well, and there
He
was that quote floating around calling RJ and Emmanuel quickly and Obi topping the softies, which I'm
yeah.
guessing he saw. So we'll see.
We'll see what happens. And I was expecting if Randall were healthy because there was a foul in that last game that Randall looked at Obi like, "Oh, word, it's like that." So I was really looking forward to the rematch whenever they shared the court, but it looks like we'll have to wait for another time. But let's get into the last segment of the show and salute to Knicks Nation for tuning in for another game of the week preview. With me on the other side is Caitlin Cooper. You can go check her out at Basketball She Wrote, her own outlet, founder, CEO, whatever you want to call her. She does it. Great basketball mind. My last thing is the X Factor. My X Factor is Quentin Grimes for this game. He's having up and down season, but I think in this matchup where you're going to need some shooting, a guy who's now showing they could be a little bit more aggressive, off the dribble, cutting to the basket. Like it seems like he's gaining more confidence in his game, and it's not it's starting to translate well after the OG trade. Like he looks like he's getting a little bit back more in a rhythm. It's up and down, but the thing is, the thing with Grimes is that I like the aggressiveness. I like that he's trying to get back into it because there's the whole rumors about him potentially being traded and so forth. But I think he'll be the X factor in this game because if he can get the three ball going for that bench unit, which not a lot of guys who can get downhill. And after Dante's showing, I'm asking for him to get some more minutes with the second unit just get more playmaking on that side. Like McBride's been fine, especially good when defending, knocking down some threes. But you need somebody who can help set these guys up, especially somebody like Grimes. Like it seems like he just needs to be set up right now just because new role, all these things coming off the bench and so forth. So for me, if you get Grimes going in this matchup because it's going to be a high scoring affair, I think the Knicks have a really good chance in getting the win.
I'll
Who
tell you
would
what. I'll tell you what about Quentin Grimes. Something that we didn't talk about when we were talking about Tyrese and Jalen is those two players reject screens more per 100 possessions than any two players in the NBA. So Tyrese, that's always his first option against the defense is to get into it and create emergency rotations. And something that Quentin Grimes did better than almost anybody I watched last year in the games where he was defending at the point of attack against Tyrese is he was a rare player who Tyrese could reject a screen and Grimes could still beat him to his spot. Like, despite I know his season has been up and down, but he's still very sticky at the point of attack. So that's another look that they could throw at Tyrese throughout the game, depending upon who's available for the Knicks. I guess if I was picking an X factor on the other side of things, I would probably pick Aaron. Aaron's been trending up lately, and I do think that it's very likely that he will be the player who is both defending Jalen Brunson and also being guarded by Jalen Brunson. So can he put pressure on Jalen Brunson as a defender? And then also, what is he able to do from a containment standpoint? Can he potentially be applying some full court pressure at times? Or will they need to be going to more trapping against Brunson eventually in that game if they can't do containment? So I would probably point at Aaron.
has and Aaron is I feel like watching Aaron, like I really like how he's developed as a player. Like not known as like the defensive guy coming out of college, but he's now become like he's really like sharp at his defensive chops. Um, is he still shooting the three ball as well as which he was marketed as coming out of I think he came out of Vanderbilt, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's taken a lot of strides with that this year. Like I think had probably been somewhat underwhelming. Is probably too harsh of a word, but with Boston, like he's a hop step shooter. So if he didn't get that in there, like sometimes his shot wasn't as clean. and he came over with the Pacers, and I think that they've worked with him on catch and shoot opportunities. I mean, he's been shooting the lights out of the ball. He's been one of the top 3-point shooters in the NBA this year. He's over 40%. He's doing more off of motion. You can see him being used more as a screener and leaking out and hitting some shots in that way. Like, he's not to the same caliber of Buddy in terms of what you're going to do as a movement shooter, but yeah, he's been really dynamic in that regard, and attacking out of the closeouts with speed. So he's getting those closeouts and he's getting to the rim pretty quickly and then doing more with his left hand. And also, like I said, just here lately, starting to make a few more interior passes off of drives. So he's the guy that I would point at for this particular matchup.
Okay. So there you have it. The X Factors. Quentin Grimes, Aaron Naismith. We'll see it. But Caitlin, thank you so much for joining me on the show. What are you expecting for? I know you're going to say the Pacers are going to win tomorrow. I would say the Knicks are going to win tomorrow. I'm not going to ask that question. All right. But how do you think this game unfolds? Do you see it just being a high scoring affair? Like, do you see it being like a defensive bloodbath just because the Knicks have been doing a good job? Like, how do you expect this game to unfold?
I'm guessing it's not going to be the same 140-point scoring affair as what it was for the Pacers in the prior matchup. I think that there will be a little bit more defense played, hopefully. I think that it's probably still going to get up and down to a degree, especially because, like, again, this isn't me trying to knock Julius Randle, but like if he isn't out there, then maybe the Knicks with that particular lineup are getting some more leak outs against the Pacers and being able to get out and run with what Dante and Josh Hart are able to do in that regard. So I don't know. It's possible it plays more towards the Pacers stylistically than what typically is seen of the Knicks, but we'll see. Like, the Pacers need to continue to build the chemistry between Tyrese and Pascal and at least have them out there in more games at the same time. So still waiting to see a little bit more there. And I'm most curious just to see how the tension continues to get put on the defense between the two of them. Because you could see in the first game against Portland that, like, you could have Pascal on the post, and if Tyrese went and screened away from the ball, the defender would actually go with him, and then that's just an isolation for Pascal, and he's typically going to cook at that. Then once Tyrese was out of the lineup, Pascal was getting a lot of attention despite the fact of how good the Pacers have typically been at shooting the ball this year. So be interested to see from the Knicks who they commit a little bit more of the defensive attention to between the two of them when they're both out there.
I agree with you. I don't see the scoring affair to be 140 just because the Knicks have been playing really good defense, even without OG. They're still playing good defense. I get it that it's against the Hornets and the Utah Jazz, but Knicks defensively have been locked in. I expect this to be a high scoring affair, even with some defenses. I feel like it's going to come down to key defensive stops, and then the game's going to be decided by either Brunson or Halliburton. That's because from what I've watched, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, like when I watch the Pacers, it's like Halliburton gets everybody set up first, and then he turns it on in the second half, like
Right.
to call his own number. For Brunson, he does that too, but it's without Randall, it's a little different now because now he has to it's him, like what is it? I guess it's him pacing himself, just figuring out when the spots are, when to turn up. So I still expecting a high scoring affair, but I feel like it's just going to come down to between those players in the fourth quarter. That's my outlook for the game.
I hope that's what the outlook for the game is. That would be tremendous watch for all of us involved, I think, if that's what it
Oh
comes
yeah,
down to.
exciting game. We want an exciting game, We'll be back at MSG. That's what we want. An exciting game. Halliburton, Brunson just duking it out. That's what the fans need. Okay. That's what the fans need. But Caitlin, once again, thank you for joining the show. Please let our listeners know where they can find you. And if you got any upcoming work we should be on the lookout for.
Right. So my handle on X is at C2_Cooper. If you go there, the link to my Patreon is there, patreon.com/basketballshewrote. Most recently, I'm looking into what Pascal's been doing against cross matches because I'm intrigued by that, and we'll see what I end up doing there. And then I recently have released a new line of shirts. So
nice.
We've got I remade the GQ photo from 10 years ago with the Pacers. That if people want to have some enjoyment with that, you can go check that out. That's all linked on my Twitter, and that's the most recent post is about the new merchandise that you can go look at.
There we go. Awesome. Well, Caitlin, thank you once again for joining me on the show. Once again, this is Caitlin Cooper. You can go find her work. She's the creator, founder, CEO of Basketball She Wrote. She does an excellent job when it comes to covering the Indiana Pacers, and just great basketball knowledge, great basketball mind. As you all are saying in the chat, you all love Caitlin. You all want her to come back on and do more of these things because, come on, guys, that's all we do. We bring on the greatest guests possible, okay? We bring on the greatest guests possible. But once again, thank you to Caitlin. Also, Knicks Nation, you all know what to do. Hit that thumbs up button for your squad. Make sure to share the links to all these videos. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't done so already. And also make sure to support our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Use that promo code KFTV to get up to a $100 match. Also, make sure to go out to and check KnicksFanTV.com. We got a bunch of great writers over there contributing. So make sure to support the website as well. And yeah, we'll be tuning in. We'll be locked in tomorrow for the Knicks facing off against the Indiana Pacers home at Madison Square Garden at 7:30 tomorrow. And you know what you got to do? You got to make sure to tap in for play-by-play with our guy CK2K. He's back at it, back on the mic again to call this game. So make sure to tap in tomorrow to that, and you'll catch us afterwards for post-game as always. Thank you once again, Knicks Nation. We'll catch you later. We out.